words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts at this time be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. In these verses, we find identity. It's about who Jesus is and who the disciples think he is. And in turn, for us, as we read these words today, it's about who we think Jesus is and the role that he plays in our lives. It's also about commitment. In our culture, in the world we live in, where we are right now, it's so easy to give our commitment to many things, to other things, to our jobs, our relationships, our friendships, things that are important to us, even to hobbies. And these are all good things, but they are especially good when they are subordinate to our commitment to Christ. One of the central elements in our faith is turning away from our own selfish nature and turning ourselves over to God. Being committed to God, not just a little bit, but fully committed, totally committed. Giving ourselves completely to God, much in the same way that Jesus is describing in this passage. We're called to deny ourselves and to take up the cross of Jesus Christ and then follow him in every aspect of our lives, every single day, wherever we are, whatever we're going through. It's easy to summarize that. It's even easier to say it, but it's very hard to actually do it. We turn back to ourselves so easily. If I were to try to summarize this, it's just all about giving yourself completely to God. That's what this passage is about. Being completely sold out, being completely surrendered to God. And if we think about it, and Jesus even really kind of alludes to this, it's interesting because God's not getting a great deal here. God is God. So what do we offer? Not much, considering to whom we are offering this gift. Even if we're incredibly talented, amazingly gifted, frequently go to Bach with the creativity. But if we're talented and gifted in our own way, God's still not getting a good deal because God already has everything. Give ourselves completely to God. And that's a challenge because we turn back to ourselves. And we're taught from a very young age to work hard, strive for the best, take charge, make our voice heard. That's what our culture values. Those are the kinds of people who our culture praises. And in many ways, this is why our country is so successful, but in many ways, our American culture abhors balancing these aspects of life with our relationship with Christ, or placing everything underneath Christ. Because the most celebrated, most successful people, whether you look in the newspaper or in pop culture in any way, are typically narcissistic, completely centered on themselves, putting everything aside at the expense of their goals, their vision. And you can look at any of the great successful stories of the 20th century, for example. There's a special tomorrow night, I believe, on Walt Disney on PBS. I heard it advertised this morning. And I've heard about his life and how there wasn't a lot of balance in his life. As a matter of fact, Berry Gordy, the great producer of Motown, some of those amazing hits of the 60s, I'm sure if we opened the floor now, you'd all rattle off your favorite Motown hits. But it colored a generation with music and introduced a wonderful sound. Berry Gordy was never satisfied with a single record that he put out. There always came a point where they just had to go ahead and release it. The same goes for so many of these successful voices. Walt Disney was never happy. He said, well, that's good enough. It was never good enough. And here we see a call to put everything below Christ, to put everything in balance with Christ, to put everything beneath God. There's a bumper sticker, you've probably all seen it. The one with the most toys wins. That's not true, actually. I hate to break it to you if you've been going for that. The one with the most toys is still just as dead. The one who gives his or her life completely to Christ wins. Because we learn about a richness and a profound, deep life that isn't available through all of these other things. The success of music or entertainment, the gathering of great amounts of toys, as fun as they may be. And these lessons are difficult. They're difficult for us today because we look around and the allure of what's new and shiny and wonderful or of success can be incredible. It's like the siren song and Odysseus' stories. These lessons are very difficult. But they're not just difficult for us. They were even difficult for people who were with Jesus. We might think, kind of deluding ourselves sometimes. It was easy for the apostles. They were with him. They saw him in the flesh. They saw him performing miracles. They heard his sermons, which none of us doing this today can hold a candle to that. But it was no easier for them. In our passage today, we have a group of people who were with Jesus, walking with him, witnessing everything he did, hearing him speak. And he starts on one of these lessons. Hey guys, gather up. Take a knee, everybody. The Son of Man, that's me, remember. Remember yesterday's lesson from chapter 7. Is going to have to undergo great suffering. And these folks who had been with him had been watching and listening and observing who he is. Have trouble with that. What did you say, Jesus? Sort of like different strokes. What you talking about, Willis? Jesus repeats, look, the Son of Man is going to have to undergo lots of suffering. The elders are going to reject him, and so are the chief priests and the scribes and everybody, and all those folks, the ones who we would think would get it, would see what's happening here. Oh, Jesus. I can imagine in their own vernacular. Mark cleaned it up, of course, for our intellectual ears. But in our language, we would say, take it easy, Jesus. Hang on. Let's not talk about all that. Jesus continues, one more thing. I'm going to have to be killed. But on the third day, I'm going to rise. Things have gone too far at this point, and Peter, being Peter, takes him aside. Up to this point, Jesus' lessons, his words, all this talk about suffering, even his not-so-veiled criticisms of the Pharisees and scribes and chief priests, have been pretty much open for public consumption. Anybody who wanted to hear it, walking by, they're in this area, Caesarea Philippi, anybody would have heard this. It wasn't just the disciples, it was also the peripheral followers of Christ. It was also the people who just said, hey, look, a crowd. Let me see what's happening. They were all listening. They were all getting this lesson. And so Peter says, this has gone far enough. And he needs to set Jesus straight. For those of us with our post-resurrection ears, those of us who have gathered together to sing today, Be Thou My Vision, we think when it starts out, Peter had to set Jesus straight. Oh, this isn't going to go well for Peter. And so he pulls him aside and he says, hang on, Jesus. You just can't go around talking like this. Things are going really well for us. Don't break the momentum. You healed that guy with leprosy. You've healed people who were sick. You even brought Jairus' daughter back to life when she was dead. You've taught us some great lessons and parables. I love about the one about the mustard seed. See how the smell does something. Or maybe it was because it was small. Yes, that's it. Because it was small, it's like we should grow, our faith should grow like that. You keep teaching us about this light under a basket thing and how we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't hold back. Who do you think and calmed that storm. We were all terrified, and we walked on water after that. Now, what is all this talk about being rejected? Jesus, I just think that, and he couldn't finish because Jesus interrupted him. And I picture Jesus taking Peter by the shoulder and turning him back to the crowd, because no longer is this going to be a private conversation, but Jesus is responding to this idea, and he says, "Get behind me, Satan." He wanted anybody else who was listening in, even those who have just peripherally come by, to see what the big fuss was about. Peter was thinking about earthly things, the same thing you and I do every single day. His mind was on his own game. His mind was on what seems important to us. His mind was on political gains. Unlike us, with our religious liberty, our freedom to gather and read Scripture openly and to get into a community of fellowship, they didn't have that. They were in an occupied territory. And so Peter could see the momentum moving toward political liberation. He was so set on seeing things from a human perspective that he missed out on the divine, and it was standing right in front of him. He was thinking about uprisings, kicking the Romans out. What, in short, can only be described as an earthly ideal of success. And you know what? The Bible reminds us of this over and over and over again. God doesn't play by those same rules. God doesn't play by our rules. God doesn't play by human rules. Jesus interrupted him and turned him back to turn it into a teaching moment. "Get behind me, Satan." It might sound harsh to us, but he needed to get their attention. If they were planning the arrival of the Messiah, they saw this happening in a certain way. If we were planning the arrival of the Messiah, we might see it in the same way they saw it. It's not up to us. Remember what I said at the beginning? We're supposed to resign ourselves, put everything beneath Christ, give ourselves over completely to God. Jesus points out, and I imagine at this point he's taking a more pastoral tone. It's my imagination. The Greek lacks notation for vocal tone. But he might take a more pastoral tone. You've got your mind on things of this world. Not heavenly things. Not the things that really matter. He could have gone on and answered every one of Peter's objections. Those healings were to point out God's glory and dominion, even over diseases, back in Mark 1 and 3. The repair of a genetic condition like paralysis from birth, we read it in Mark 2, was to point to God's power over those limitations. Jesus might have said, "I brought Jairus' daughter back from death to life, not because she was going to stay alive forever, but to show everybody that God indeed has power over death." The parables were intended to teach you something about God. The lamp under the bushel was about giving yourself over, not hiding, not holding back from God, Peter. The mustard seed, and yes, it wasn't the smell, it was the small seed that grows. It's like faith, it grows great. Calming the storm, Peter, was to show you that God is more powerful than even the weather. You know, it's hard to deny ourselves. It's hard to not be our own nature. It's against the way we not only are wired, but it's against the way the world all around us pushes us. And we don't tend to do it on our own. We follow our own desires and teachings when we're left to ourselves. We follow the voices all around us. We look at success stories that seem like success to us. If you were to say, "Who's your hero?" and someone were to say, "I'd really like to follow a homeless man who ended up getting killed wrongfully," it just wouldn't make sense to our culture and our ears. In short, we act like Peter. Church becomes a place to gather with other people, and we miss out on the amazing transformation that God has for us. And it's quite simple. We do that because we set our mind on human things. Our commitment to Christ should take precedence over everything in our lives. It's good to have things that we take pride in. It's good to have things that we work hard for. It's good to try to do our best in everything we do. It's good to value relationships, to give our commitment to work. But everything comes beneath our commitment to Christ. And we start out by saying, you know what, it's not about me. It's about God. I'm not the center of the world. God is. Peter said with words what we do with our actions every single day. Hold on, Jesus. Let me tell you how this is going to go. And Jesus was right to correct him. And you know what? The Holy Spirit, when it nudges us and convicts us and moves us from where we were to where God wants us to be, is right as well. It's not about us. It's about God. Let's resign ourselves to God. I think that each one of us in new ways today can take up our crosses and fully commit our lives to Christ. It's not just beautiful chords. It's not just a nice rhythmic feel. It's a response to God that we can make every single day. Not just here in worship, but each morning as we begin our day. Peter is so much like us in so many ways. But when we go through our days and we start to tell God, it's okay, I got this one. Just stand by. We can respond and say, no, Lord, here am I. I'm gladly obey. This morning, I invite you to make that your prayer and your commitment. If you're here and you want to make this church your church, I invite you to come forward and share that with me as we sing. If you're here this morning and you've never publicly entered into a relationship with Christ, we would like to celebrate that with you today. So you're invited as well to come forward as we sing. The hymn is Lord, Here Am I, number 486. Let's stand together. comes to us from Genesis 1:1 as a reminder where everything begins and ends. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and separated the light from darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Go forth into this day, and shine like Jesus shines in you. Amen.